6:43 here on a Wednesday morning, and welcome back to the program. It is time for our Morning Cup of Joe segment with Sheriff Joe Lombardo. Sheriff, good to see you once again, sir. How are you today?
Good morning, John. Good to see you.
All right, well, let's get into things here. The legislative session is right around the corner. You and I have talked before about some of the issues that you think might be on the horizon from a law enforcement standpoint. What are you hoping lawmakers will address up in Carson City?
Well, I haven't been privy to too many specific details to the bills that have been presented. Every session we track a couple hundred bills on a regular basis, but the devil's in the details. Obviously, they change through time, but specifically to law enforcement, we're tracking a bill out of the Attorney General's office that addresses pattern and practice. And what that is a data collection mechanism to determine why we conducted our pedestrian stops or our vehicle stops. Is there racism systemic underneath the reason for the stop? It's just a management and monitoring of that particular issue. We dealt with it several years ago, and that's part of the reform push that we're all experiencing now. So we're going to pay attention to that. There's some modifications of the chokehold that we expect associated with police work. Public records is always on the horizon, and how we address media requests and public's requests for our information that's internal to the police department. And one thing in particular that I'm really paying attention to is NACO's property tax initiative. For those out there who don't know, 35% of my budget involves property tax, and I don't know if there's going to be a push to increase it or not, but we always want to pay attention to that because it has a direct effect on how we hire officers and function on a daily basis within our budget. But as far as us being proactive in that space, I don't anticipate we're going to have any individual bills that we are carrying to address any particular law. It's more of a defensive posture or that's not a good word, defensive, cooperative posture that we're taking moving forward.
Sheriff, I spoke a couple of weeks ago with Assemblyman Roberts, who of course used to work for Metro, and we talked a little bit about some of the reform efforts. Do you believe that there is reception, not even so much from the lawmaker standpoint, because you're not obviously up there, but on Metro's standpoint, to put in place some reforms that are being maybe addressed up in Carson City?
Well, that cart has already left the barn. A lot of the reform efforts that you're seeing nationwide that people are directing, like body-worn cameras and police officer discipline and duty to render aid and your force continuum and de-escalation, all those particular items are already in place here at Las Vegas Metro. That's one particular thing I'm very proud of. We realized that was occurring, and it was on the horizon and something we had to address sooner than later. It didn't take a significant event like George Floyd for us to act. That was all put in place prior to. Now, the surrounding jurisdictions throughout the state of Nevada have some catching up to do. And so a lot of those things that people on the tip of their tongue and are on front of their mind that they're talking about and concerned with, they're already in place with Metro.
Let's switch gears and talk about the riot on Capitol Hill in Washington. You and I have talked about this before. What have you learned so far about how many Metro police officers may have been at the event on Capitol Hill and may have actually participated in the riot?
So obviously this is an ongoing investigation. And today, the best of our knowledge, we only had one officer as part of LVMPD present at the protest or the insurrection or whatever title you're giving it. But that officer was able to be tracked. He had a definitive clothing description, and we were able to determine that he did not enter the Capitol. In the interview with the officer himself, he also stated as such he didn't participate in any civil unrest, and he was practicing his First Amendment ability to protest or express their views in general. But so if there was any other officers involved, we did have an anonymous call in. We ran that down. It was false. There was no validity to the call in, and we haven't identified any other officers.
Okay. Let's change also to talk about security on the Las Vegas Strip. Earlier this month, there was a fight. There was a shooting outside the Palazzo. We've talked about Metro's efforts to step up enforcement on the Strip dating back to the summer. Is that enforcement level still in place, and where do things stand with regards to enforcement there right now?
Well, no, we've pulled back a little bit. It was called persistent pressure, and it was done mostly through the summertime, and then we continued it through the fall to deal with what was occurring on the Strip. And everybody's aware of what was occurring. We had a significant change in the demographics down on the Strip. People were being unruly, releasing anxiety, dealing with different issues out on the roadway versus inside the casinos. Seeing that, we adjusted our resources and pushed our resources to the best of our ability down there to address the problem. So we effected 1,200 plus arrests. We recovered 571 guns, I believe it is. And then that was a direct result of our proactivity of our police officers, what we expect them to do to gain control of a situation. Now the situation down there is completely different than what we experienced earlier in the year or the previous year, and the crime numbers are bearing fruit associated with that. So the numbers are positive, and what I mean by positive, it's good in a good light versus being actually positive of an increase in crime. So we anticipate we're going to do some proactive human trafficking efforts down there in the next coming months, and I would say keep a posture of monitoring at this point, because it's just as important for us to do enforcement in the neighborhoods and make sure those resources aren't depleted in what we do on a daily basis.
All right. Sheriff Lombardo, thanks again for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. If you at home have a question for the sheriff, you can submit it online, 8newsnow.com. You can find out if it's answered every Wednesday. 10 minutes.